Quick tip. No, wait, that's not what I'm calling it. I'm calling it Tuesday Tiny Tips. Tiny Tim's Tuesday Guitar Tips. Tip of the morning guitar to you, ye old Irishmen. People of the world, friends and relatives. I'm like 30% Scottish, so I'm allowed to say the word Irish. Look, I have another tip for you today, and it's about using the tips of your fingers versus the pads of your fingers. I just dropped my pick. You're supposed to always use the tip, right? That's what everybody says. You're supposed to use the tippiest tip of your finger all the time. Not true. It's a lie. It's a bald-faced lie. Bold-faced is also an acceptable thing to say, but I do believe it was originally bald-faced. I think it's like unashamedly exposed. Bald-faced. Because if you're bald, that means you're not ashamed of exposing yourself. That's not right. So these Tiny Tuesday tips are supposed to be like, I'm trying to make them like 3 minutes long. Tres, that's Spanish for three. Surprised you didn't know that. So apparently that means 2.5 minutes of just utter nonsense and then 30 seconds of a tip. Look, you only need to use the tips of your fingers if you want to make sure you don't mute the other strings. So look, like a G chord. Look at a G chord. Every single string needs to be heard. So if I use the pads of my fingers, listen, I'm muting strings, and it actually sounded better than I thought it would. It actually sounds fine, so whatever. I guess you can use the pads of your fingers on a G. How about a C chord though? Look, C chord, pads of my fingers, listen. Not good. You need to use the tips of your fingers for a C chord because you want every single string to ring out. But if you're playing single notes, like look, I'm just gonna play a scale. I'm using the pads of my finger, especially my pinky. My pinky isn't even pretending to use the tip. It's just full on the pad of my pinky. Like sometimes my pointer finger might be the tip a little bit, but it's not a big deal. My point is, if you are playing single notes, if you use the tip of your finger, it's like you have to aim right at the string. It's very difficult. You see me just mess up with my ring finger? It's really hard to aim. Plus, you have to have your fingers all bent to use the tips of your fingers, so that makes your fingers effectively shorter. You don't need to do that. Just use the pads of your fingers. I don't know who got this whole idea in everybody's head that you always have to use the tip. If you're playing chords, then usually you want to use the tip. But like if you're playing a power chord, guys, how many fingertips do you see here? I mean, you see all 4 fingertips, but how many are being used to play guitar? 0% of the fingertips. It's now, secondary follow-up question, how many finger pads do you see being used? 0, because they're back here. They're hidden behind my fingers. But to answer the question about which ones are being used, I didn't ask which are being used. I said Arby's. Carl's Jr. This is exactly what I didn't want it to be. 2 finger pads are being used. Quick tip, Tuesday, Tiny Tim.